Group and Obol. So I'll do some really fast introductions and then we'll hop into it. From EthStaker, we have Nick Sorokish, Anvetica, Sam Coffey,
Yep.
Thorsten, who we call Yorick down for some reason, and welcome Iridian to your first EthStaker call. Glad to have you with us. Remy Roy and Nolan, aka Lamboshi. And from Obol, we have
go for it. Do what you want. Anything close.
We have Oshin, Colin, and Chris. So so the EthStaker group and Obol have been kind of aligned for probably over a year. And as this Obol product is developed and we've known about it, we've known about the DBT solutions. I have had my own personal attitude shift and growth about DBT, things I hope we can talk about on this call. But I'm glad to have you all with us. This is a really exciting one for me. I think we're going to do a demo, and I've kind of been saying on Twitter, like, I really want to try the Obol demo. I didn't get to it, so hopefully it will come to me today. So with that, let's make this happen. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We're gonna start off with just what Obol is, and then we'll go through a demo, and then we'll ask a bunch of questions about Obol, and then we'll wrap up after that and talk about future calls. So without further ado, either Colin, Oshin, or Chris, do you want to give us an overview of what Obol is and like what it does for the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'll let Colin kick us off, and then I'll take them through the demo.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for having us on. Super excited we were able to finally put this together, kind of multiple months in the making. Mostly been waiting on us to ship, but now it's a good time to go through everything. So on our side, what is Obol? Today, the Obol Labs team is grown to nearly 20 people. We're spread out across 10 different countries, quite a diverse team. And we're focused and have been focused on delivering an implementation of distributed validator technology. And without diving too deep into it, I'll kind of give you a better idea of like our mission, like what is our mission and what are we focused on. Today, our primary objective is to change people's minds about the way that they view validators. Today, validators are viewed as individuals, they are viewed as entities, they are viewed as exchanges. However, validators with DBT could be run by communities. So our whole intention with what we're doing with like the community and how we're pushing the technology forward is to change people's minds that validators only need to be run by individuals. Validators can be run by groups of people with DBT. And that's our mission and that's our primary focus.
Sweet. So yeah, I think honestly the best way to describe DBT is to kind of play around with it, as kind of Fizz mentioned. So the demo we're going to do today basically is we're going to create the private keys for a distributed validator, and we're going to do that by doing a DKG, or a distributed key generation ceremony. This is a fancy way of saying that all of the 5 of us that are going to take part will all kind of contribute some secret data as part of a group, and then as a result we'll pull out our own secret private keys on the far side, and together all of these private keys will add up to one distributed validator that we all have basically a multi-sig for. So if you think of most people in the space know what a multi-sig is. If you need 3 or 4 people to sign in for the transaction to go through, imagine having a validator where you need 3 or 4 people to be online for your validator to stay up. The first thing we're going to do is the DKG is basically 2/2. No, Fizz, we're not going to run this one for a long time. I don't think this is going to be a first practice, but down to get someone for the long term shortly.
I need this. I'm going to run this key to the ground. I promise. Like, I'm going to be the last man standing.
Quite plausibly. So before we kick off, I want to maybe briefly talk about what we're going to do first. So when we knew kind of always that the centralization of private keys is kind of the crux of a validator. Like if that isn't rock solid, you're not really going to get very far. It doesn't really kind of, to some extent, matter how decentralized some of the rest of your stuff is doing. So we always knew that we didn't want one operator to have total control over the private key, because then they can slash you. So we were very focused on effectively nobody having control over the private key. So we built a prototype, all in the command line, and it just generated kind of a password to the lobby to like join, you might say. And very quickly we ran into the problem that it was like, okay, we don't know who's involved. Someone could have just like ran the command twice. So we were like, well, good thing everyone has, identities and like ENS names and like, well-known addresses. We can rely on all of those, but they're generally in the browser. So then in a kind of second iteration, we built this nearly entirely in the browser. But then we were getting kind of concerned. We were like, this doesn't feel really safe to be making private keys in a browser. And we kind of went back to the drawing board and came up with what we have now, which is kind of our third iteration. And in this one, in the user interface or in the browser, you get presented with like nice and easy screens to eyeball what's going on. You confirm that this is the distributed validator you expect to make. It's with the people that you've agreed. It's going to the withdrawal address that you all expect. You're making as many of them as you want, and it's on the right network. No one's sneaking you onto mainnet when you think you're making a girly validator, for example. So without further ado, Chris has shared in the chat a link, and if I have the permissions, I'm going to try and share my screen. I do not have the permission, so but basically what we're going to see is Chris has already done a bit of pre-work for us. We've listed all the addresses we're going to use. So now I'm getting thumbs up.
Yeah, I think you're co-host now.
Yeah, so let me find my screen.
I want to be co-host. Where's my invite?
I'm giving it to everyone. You
Nice.
get a co-host and you get a co-host. Everybody gets a co-host.
So yeah, so for those of you that have the link, go on yourselves, and for those that aren't, you can kind of watch along. But one of the things that you will need to do is the very first thing you need to do is make a private key, and this is the key that will sit on your machine. So on your DApp node, on your staking machine, we're not asking you to put your super fizz.eth private key onto some like cloud connected machine. That wouldn't be super wise. So to do that, Chris might be able to share the link to the docs, but it's more or less one Docker command to run, and it will spit out a public key that you'll be entering in here. But yeah, briefly, you can see this is going to be a cluster called EthStaker. There's 5 of us. That means 4 out of the 5 will need to be online at any one time. This relates to basically the consensus mechanism we're using. The thresholds are usually 3 of 4, 5 of 7, or like 7 of 10 people to be online. And we're going to make one validator, and it's going to be on Girly. So I'm going to walk through this, and if you guys want to do the same thing in your own stead, the main thing will be creating that ENR public key. Might take a little bit of work, but once you can do that, you'll be all good. So I shouldn't be kind of clicking through this too fast, but most of you guys might recognize that this is very similar to the advisories on the old ETH2 staking launchpad. I shouldn't call it old too, but Chris here would have been the head of product that worked with the Ethereum Foundation to develop the original one. And when we were trying to figure out how do we make these, accessible to everyone, making a launchpad seemed like kind of the perfect way to get this technology into people's hands. But either you're going along and you're saying, yes, this is experimental software, you can get slashed, all of the kind of usual disclaimers about staking, and then you get presented with the time to actually put in your data. So this is the only real thing you have to gather, which is an Ethereum node record, or the like public key for your machine. If I was being smart, would have prepared this before I got on, but I'm now going to have to do it here. So maybe while I'm preparing it, someone might want to ask Colin a question about Obol, and we can kind of pick this back up. Cheers.
I just have a clarification question for like context. So in this scenario, these people know each other. Where's the deposit? Where's the hardware?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in this context, the deposit comes after this flow, and it goes into the deposit contract. So once you go through your configuration steps, then eventually you enter into your deposit steps. Right now, I guess this is the most trusted model of the technology. So all these people do have to know each other, and it's encouraged that they do. They can meet and then they can come together. But yeah, all of these people that are inside of these clusters that we'll create have 0 degrees of separation from each other. They know each other. They've decided to do this together. They haven't been brought together through another means.
So Sorry, in this case, they all have a number of ETH up to 32, and they're all using these 5 addresses to make these deposits.
So I'll take where you don't necessarily even like we don't necessarily take opinion for this. At the end of this flow, it'll just spit out a deposit data. So you could, for example, list that deposit data in, like Lido for activation, or the Rocket Pool flow is a bit different, obviously, because you're only putting, well, it's still a deposit data, but yeah, generally speaking, and it actually is timely because it's the next thing on it. The main thing you're choosing here is what's the withdrawal address going to be. That's the one that people need to understand, because anybody can take the 32 ETH and send it, and we're working on ways to make it easy for groups to get involved, like pool their ETH together. But yeah, ultimately where it comes back to is kind of key. So right now we have 2 addresses that I expect are Chris is here set, and they be the the crucial thing that everyone is verifying. You kind of need to make sure, am I doing with the people that I expect, and is the the validator going to withdraw to the splitter contract where we all get paid, or the the Rocket Pool mini pool, or whatever the case may be is.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick on someone. So I'm gonna pick on the person that I think has the most money here. That's either Nolan or Fizz. I'm not quite sure. Either one of those. We're doing.
It's Fizz.
It's Fizz.
I say that's a trick
Nolan.
question because it's Thorsten.
No, definitely not. So we have our 5-member node, right? And at some point, either one of those says, you know what? I've made my nut 10x over. I'm done. I'm shutting off my node. I'm walking away. Thank you. Now, is there a way to replace that node with another one? Or do you have to go and say, okay, that's it. We're shutting this down and setting up a new ceremony with a new set of people?
It's a good question. Right now, we don't have operator rotation built. It is possible to do, but basically the reason we're a little slow to do it is you're leaving data behind every time you kind of migrate away. If Nolan kind of leaves, he can just publish that private key, and all of a sudden our 4 out of 5 is now a bit of a 3 of 4, and so on. So generally, yeah, it is possible to rotate one operator out and put a new one in, but we haven't implemented yet. Right now, we're very focused on shipping what you can fairly call an MVP. So the main thing that got sacrificed is editability. So right now, if something doesn't really go right, you're not super happy with it, we're planning to use the exit queue. Be like, yeah, let's exit the validator and create a new one. not get too
software.
fancy.
I mean, answer. I mean, like the whole DVT space is brand new. No one's live on main. Everybody's
sure.
MVPs.
And one of the things that actually is worth bringing up is relates to the actual private keys and how much control the Charon software, which is the name of the client we've built. We want to keep that as far away from the private keys as it possibly can be, to be perfectly honest. So how Charon is built is it's actually like a middleware. So it sits between a validator client and a consensus client, and it intercepts the traffic that's going between them. But other than this DKG where we create the private keys now, that's the last time it has any access to them. So after that point, you would take it and you'd put it into your Web3 signer or into your Lighthouse or your Teku validator client. And that's kind of, in our mind, really important, because and to some extent, I mentally think when there's a compromise to the current software, there's a dodgy library that, somebody is compromised, or there's a vulnerability that someone can exploit, or, whatever failure scenario you can imagine. If Charon doesn't have the private keys, there's not as much damage it can cause. It can, ask the private keys of the downstream validator to sign something slashable, but assuming that, the validators work as intended, they should say, no, I'm not signing this. I've already signed something for that block height, or I've already said finality was here. So yeah, that trade-off then means removing an operator. Charon, we can change the ENR quite straightforwardly, but you have to nearly go and get the BLS private keys to do this kind of rotation where you remove one person and put in someone new. So I'm somewhat scared that if we do add this feature, then all of a sudden we get too close to the private keys again. So sometimes I'm like, let's keep it simple. Let's just exit the validator and create a new one for the time being. But
come back, right? And as we all know, Ethereum will once more fail with exits, or it won't, and it'll be working just fine in March, April, right? Just like it failed with merge.
For sure. Fizz, I see a hand raised.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm scattered here. So I'm trying to generate this ENR, and I essentially have I have a folder. I've created a text file with my private key in it. What format is it looking for my private key in?
You don't use
So
private
it
key, you
creates
use
it.
ENR. So there
Okay.
should be a printout
gives it to
on
you.
screen saying my ENR is.
Yeah, so let me grab you the link just to clarify.
I'm doing Docker run.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So it should spit out in the terminal, something
What you
starting
should
with ENR.
see, yeah, is created ENR private key, and then right after that ENR and a string, and then please back up your key. So the
Okay, so
the string you see is not the private key.
what I'm seeing is private key not found. If this is your first time running the client, create one with share run create ENR.
That is what you should have run. Create ENR.
So I dropped a link into the chat to the docs, and there's basically 3 commands in the first box. There's kind of a git clone.
Oh, this is gorgeous. All right, sorry.
No worries.
4 or 5.
Yeah, we're making good progress.
And I feel like everybody else had the instructions.
Probably, to be fair. I will admit we gave people not a lot of notice. I think the guys asked, like, do you want to do a demo? And it's like, can the attendees take part in the demo? And they were like, well, we haven't given them any notice. And I'm like, it'll be fine.
Oh my gosh, with the instructions, it's actually easy.
Nice. Good to hear.
Okay. I was like, why am I incompetent? All right, and I can sign that. Well, I mean, we know. All right.
Amazing. Okay, so that was more or less the first half of doing a DKG. This is basically where everyone shows up, authenticates, shows up with their ENS name and says, yep, we all agree to exactly what we're about to create. And what you should all see in front of you now is basically a command to copy and paste. So at your leisure, guys, you can run that, and I will figure out how to reshare to show people watching what's going to happen.
Yeah, very good. I'm connected to Bright Industry. Whoever that is Bright and Industrious.
I'm connected to Cheerful Health and Gifted Jewelry.
Gifted Jewelry, yeah.
Yeah, our naming has been a bit tricky.
So yeah, I actually wonder how we get AI on these names and produce some better ones.
It's funny. For a long time, I have publicly been hesitant about DVT solutions. Like I haven't, and even with Obol, I've been kind of like, yeah, I like that you're working on something, but I'm not really, too into it. But when I get to this, like we're splitting and generating a key together, I love this kind of thing between friends. I think like in a way to allow people to share a validator, it's an incredible use of our technology stack. It only scares me when we have really large providers who are in a DVT network, and then we end up it has the potential to centralize the network. I love that at a lower level, what we're doing, it's decentralizing the network. So I'm wildly excited about that.
Great.
It's like the way we look at it is it's the next chapter of decentralization, because what you can do is you can fractionalize your nodes essentially, right? So like not only do you have this concept of like, as we all know, running at-home validators is best for the network, but to be honest with you, like running at-home validators outside of major countries like the US or Western Europe is like not cool. We have team members in India and Cape Town and Honduras and like all over the world, and they can't even run at-home validators by themselves, right? The only way for them to do it is either in the cloud or with a group of people. And we know that doing it with a group of people is better, right? So as we push on to our next chapter of decentralization, we look at it as just like enabling, call it 10 million nodes to be on the network, as opposed to just 1 million, because you can fractionalize everything else.
Especially as 32 ether and 16 ether like moves far into like, unattainability for people. Being able to run it as a group is how we keep people staking from home and stuff.
And
But I
so
think we're probably, I'm more or less going to hit go on this and then we're going to continue the chat. But is everyone more or less ready? We should see this connect to peers and hopefully all happen if everyone's online. Okay, so it looks like we have one more person that needs to run the command and then it'll kick off. Is anyone around having not able to run the command that's in front of them?
my screen is similar to yours.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm able to get to this point. I don't know if it's going to work with the key that I used. Will this hold it up if there's one person missing?
Yes. What do you mean by what the key that you used?
Oh, I generated a key on a different machine, so I can't copy it across.
Can you run the command over on the machine where you made the key?
I can try. I don't want to hold it up.
Take your time. We can go back to chatting and it'll work if you get it connected, and if it doesn't, that'll be it.
Okay.
So are we all going to receive our own validator key to run locally, and then so we're all doing like, wow,
Action.
But it won't be like the real validator private key. We'll all have like different private keys that together, 4 out of the 5 of them need to work together to produce the real validator private key, you might say.
So I guess what I'm in runtime, am I running like a regular consensus and execution client? How am I going to load the keys into that?
So what this spits out is basically the exact same format as the Launchpad. So you do the like Launchpad import flow, and we're also adding the Key Manager API. So if you have your Web3 signer or something in DAppNode set up, you'll be able to go.
Very exciting. I'm like, I want to do one with EthStaker. I want to do one with my local crew. Like, and so as far as fee recipient,
go for it.
How does fee recipient work?
The fee recipient right now, you just pick one at the start, and everyone kind of agrees this is the one we're going to use. And if you try and submit blocks with something else, they'll be like, no, don't be cheating and trying to like sweep the fees for only yourself. You all agreed you're going to use this fee recipient. So, it's more or less you set it at creation time, and everyone always uses the exact same fee recipient.
Is it enforced?
Yeah, in software, like Charon won't propagate a block that's for the wrong fee recipient. As in, if one of the people is trying to be cheeky and say like, oh yeah, here's a block and I'm setting my address as fee recipient, the other 3 will be like, hey, that's not what we agreed. That's being Byzantine, or that's being malicious.
Awesome.
Aurelian's one they were trying again, yeah.
When you started the demo, it said 4 out of 5. What was the 4 out of 5 if not one of them doesn't have to be working?
One of them won't have to be online, but we do need to create 5 private keys, and only 4 of the 5 will need to be online at any one time staking. But yeah, we're not ability to bail at the moment. But I don't mind, like it wouldn't take more than a few minutes. We can kind of continue to chat if we want and have a second attempt at it at the 4 people.
Go through it again. I think that'd be good.
I'd love to do it again.
I think I'm ready. Yeah, it'd be good to go through it. Yeah.
There's another chance of not being last.
Yeah.
No, so, this is exciting to me. I'm all about group things. I love group buys. I love group, like anytime you can get a bunch of people on the hook for the same thing, it's fun to me. So this is my obsession.
Great. And one of the things actually, Fizz, that you did mention earlier that I'd like, a chance to chat about is the idea of, how we roll out DVT and whether you roll stuff out on the kind of home staker end or on the kind of enterprise end first. And I think it's honestly fair to say that, for the first while so far, we've put a lot of time and focus into like, I don't want to say dealing or solving the large centralized operators, but how we look at it is kind of from a network risk to Ethereum. And decentralizing the small home staker is nice, and it opens up the next era of small home stakers and people that couldn't otherwise stake being able to take part. But they're doing a good job so far and are by no means a threat to the network right now, or could be like issues for like online and stuff. Whereas, you guys are more than aware that a lot of the like centralized stuff is sorry, a lot of the big centralized operators run a huge amount of stake, and they're the people that we need to decentralize and stuff. And kind of similarly related to it, this tech is very new and kind of R&D, and it takes a reasonable amount of familiarity to kind of run it and debug it and stuff. So when we were kind of deciding, what's the problem to solve, we were like, there's 5 or 10 companies that if they go bad or do an FTX, they could cause like a massive bit of damage to the network. So we've kind of focused there first. And when we're a bit more mature and the software is a bit more robust, and it's plug and play in DApp node, and it's plug and play in all of the like different UIs, then we'd be making much more of a push on the like home staker end. But we've just been a little conscious that there's a lot of people out there with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ether that if we give them this technology, they're like, yeah, sweet, awesome, love this opportunity. We've all put the entirety of our life savings together. We got to the 32 or we got to the 16, and we've activated one, and now we're having trouble staying up to head, and we're it's turned out it's been like we're having issues and stuff, and we wouldn't really have the support or like the ecosystem yet to like really like mind them and manage them yet. So our logic was, let's roll this out in like trial and small numbers with the big pools, the big centralized validators. Let's win over their trust and help them take the journey of decentralizing away from having total control over validators, and to some extent using that to kind of fund and finance and develop the long tail of home stakers, and rolling out, being like, yeah, this software is a bit more resilient now. We have good guides. The EthStaker team are trained up, and they're willing to kind of help anyone with a distributed validator, and now give it a shot. So yeah, it is worth calling out, but it has been intentional as to why we've gone this route. I don't know, Colin, if you want to add anything to it, but it's worth chatting about.
Yeah, I mean, that's like go to market, and like how do you take DVT and like build an economic foundation around it so it can exist for a long time. And then the other side of the coin is like, how do you test this stuff? And like, what is the most interesting way to test it? And that's actually with at-home validators. So our first test net that we ever did was this thing called Athena. It was at-home validators only. We had over 5,000 people sign up from 94 different countries. They all had to create an ENR, so it was less civil attack than most, but probably still some errors in there. So what we did is we actually just pulled out 1,000 people from it, put them all together in 4-person clusters. Well, some were 4, some were 6. They were wasn't too standardized. It was kind of like whatever you and your friends want to do. We set up a channel in our Discord called DKG Self-Organization, where random anons would just meet and get together and build these shared clusters. So we were able to put together over 200 4-person clusters, nearly 250. So we got all the 1,000 people together to build these nodes. Some were tested on-prem, right? Some were tested in the cloud. But our goal, with DVT is, if you have 2 people or a collection of people who are all at the furthest points across the world from each other, what is the inclusion distance? Because that's ultimately like the biggest test of the software, right? Running it with 4 friends in the cloud is a great use case, but it doesn't actually push the limits of cryptography. But testing it with at-home validators is actually where we started, instead of like larger participants in the network, because the at-home validators are actually the ones that are most susceptible to they have the lowest ease in becoming a validator. So now that we've started with the at-home validator, we've progressively gone into testing with, like the liquid staking pools like Lido and some of those other people. But we started testing with the at-home validator because it pushed the limits of the technology, which was very interesting to see.
Yeah, I'll confess my biggest worry has been that DVT is a great anti-slashing technology, but my worry ends up being taking the 5 biggest staking providers and having them all run DVT together, and then essentially I mean, you can, I guess from some perspectives it is still it still maintains like they have individual keys, but my gut struggles with accepting that as decentralization. I really perceive that as greater centralization, even if it is a 4 out of 5. But the future is coming. I always love to say the future is coming. So I'm just going to have to fit that into my existing framework.
So I think an interesting, I guess, lens I'll provide here. I think it's a good viewpoint there. An interesting lens here is DBT today, at least from where we sit in its current adoption cycle, has finally moved on from uptime and slashing protection, right? That was like how the technology was introduced. And now we're moving on to something a bit more interesting, which is preventing Byzantine behavior. So inside of a liquid staking pool, let's say this liquid staking pool has 12 to 15 operators, right? Today, that liquid staking pool is susceptible to the risk of any of those providers becoming Byzantine. They can self-slash, and they can mostly take down the social economics of liquid staking pools, because all they have as a prevention against that is social economics, right? If there's a slashing, we all share in that, which is how you stand the thing up. How you move it to the next level is that today in liquid staking pools, validators can be evil. They can be. We just assume that they won't, for social reasons, for reputational reasons, in some cases maybe slashing or penalty-based reasons. But what we need to be able to do is like enable a validator to move to the next chapter of cryptography, which is can't be evil, right? So in the context of like the four biggest providers running it together, I would argue that it actually decreases the risk inside of the network, because the game theory now between the five biggest people in the room is none of us can be evil, right? Because we can't do anything that the other entity would go against, right? I can't self-slash myself anymore inside of this pool. So from a pooling perspective, DBT's finally reached its next chapter of understanding, which is we're here to prevent Byzantine behavior. If one of these 20 validators disappears overnight or goes rogue or loses their keys or the FBI kicks their door in, whatever it may be, that pool is now fine because that defunct operator can't be Byzantine.
Yeah, and I respect that and I honor that. I'm still going to push as hard as I can for everyone to have a validator in their own home, even a solo validator in their own home. But I do see. I'm working to see this as complementary approaches and not contrasting approaches, and I think we'll get there. I think I'll get there. It's just taking time.
Yeah, so we generally say DBT is for everyone in this aspect. So Thorsten, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say one use case I see, and potentially, right, and it's not something that I've seen that protocol actually do, is there are some protocols where people can become node operators for a liquid staking protocol. Fizz can shill that one I'm talking about if he likes to.
I was thinking about my keys. What were you saying?
Yeah, exactly. And
what am I shilling? I'll do it.
Yeah, the protocol where node operators can permissionlessly become part of a liquid staking pool, right? I believe.
Oh, the one that has 1,800 independent node operators. Is that the one we're thinking of? That one,
yeah. I think they got like I think they got a cucumber or something as their.
There are so many. It's hard for me to keep them all straight.
So that one, right? The one we're all thinking of. They're currently motoring towards a bond of 8 ETH. I could see something like DBT being used to reduce that bond further, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Not only for the operator, but for average people too, right? Like we'll eventually get into an area where like 4 friends are like, hey, we all have a few ETH apiece. Let's all put this thing together. So not only does it add ramifications for the operator in a pool, but more grandly at the at-home validator layer, you can share a validator together.
Yeah,
and not have to use a pool, right?
For sure. Just so I can like stop sharing screen and close off this demo. While we were chatting and deep in the weeds decentralization, our DKG went off without a hitch. And if everyone kind of like lists in their folder, they'll see that there's a deposit data for this now distributed validator. And there's a validator keys folder, which is the exact same output as the normal launchpad. So if you kind of go to your Lighthouse or whatever VC and you do the launchpad import, you'll be able to load it in. We're still working on support for every single validator client, but being able to bring DBT to all of the validator clients is something that's very important to us as Obol, and it's kind of maybe one of the differences between us and the other DBT platform. Because if you don't and you have this like separate validator client, there's so many ways we can become our own centralization risk, and trying to like avoid that is kind of one of the fine arts of trying to like deliver this. If I can share one last thing before I stop, I would be what one of these when they're running kind of looks like. So if I share my screen, you can see effectively this is a cluster that's running. I actually think Thorsten might be in it. But you can see basically everyone's ping, so how far they were over the internet, whether they're like directly connected to one another, or whether they're online and stuff. And this one has 7 machines in it, so you can have up to 2 of them being offline, and your validator will still attest like happy days. So particularly when you can get up to like a reasonable group of people, you can really like reduce the trust in any one particular person. So we talked a bit about what really excites you about the tech and stuff, but one of the things that I'm super keen on doing is there's a huge amount of kind of young, eager people that would love to stake, but don't really have the name or like the business acumen or the kind of credibility to get in like up that next level towards the professional node operators or whatever. But if you have DVT and you have a group of people that know each other and can like work together as a team, it becomes much easier to like stake and delegate to them. And I do hope over the like long run we can more or less finance a load of kind of young and people in like low cost of living countries being like, yeah, you stake, we'll put like Rocket Pool, you stake on someone else's machine, give them a cut of the rewards, and that could be a meaningful enough of amount that it's a non-trivial like source of income for them to keep Ethereum decentralized. Thorsten, I see you point out the withdrawal credentials. I'm not necessarily suggesting we activated, is it?
You'll notice,
I set the withdrawal credentials, yes.
You'll notice that I set it to Superfizz's address this time. Like he's providing the capital, so.
Right, so
Yeah,
that's
trying to
set when
sneak that
when this
girly.
dashboard is created,
Well,
right? When the cluster is created in the dashboard.
That gets me to deposit data. And so I guess that the deposit data files are all similar. And so anyone who goes to Launchpad and deposits can deposit a portion or all of it, and they will accumulate to 32. Is that correct?
That's actually important. That's actually not the case.
Oh, good.
If you want to like only put in 1 Ether, your deposit data message is different. So you will actually blow up that Ether if you send like not the full 32. It is possible to make a 1 Ether deposit, then a 2 Ether, then a 5 Ether. And we originally had that in designs, but when the user tested it, people were like, oh, I'll just give 7, you give 6. And they make like a quick little change like verbally, and then they blow up their Ether because the deposit data needs to change. So we were like, no, 32 Ether, the same uniform deposit data. But yeah, glad you mentioned it. That is one of the
from like
another contract or something.
Or
correct.
Contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Any single person in the multi-sig can use the deposit data to deposit 32 ETH. That's
correct.
Okay. Yeah. I had one. Are we really? I want to run this. Now, are we really going to run it? Like, I'm gonna.
You can call Docker Compose up and watch it kind of start up, and if you have the repo checked out.
Wait, is it going to launch a? I mean, I'll still have to launch a validator, right?
It's all set up in that. If you git clone that repo, there's some basic starter stuff there. It's not the flashiest, but it should work. I'm gonna run it over here. See what happens.
I'm doing it. So I assumed. I love that you have built clients built into your stack. That's not what I expected. So that's another level of like supporting the user where they're like not having to figure it out.
Also supporting the network though too, like that's our whole goal. And we talk about risks of DVT, like it needs to be additive to the current client base of today, right? Like the EF and a bunch of other donators essentially, and us developers that have spent the past 6 years building an extremely strong ETH1 and ETH2 client base, right? These are great teams, best talent in the space, well incentivized finally now that we've gotten through the merge. Why would you build something that's competitive to them, right? Our goal is to build something that's additive and to actually like help that solid foundation, which is, an unmonetizable foundation, which should always, forever be free. And now new projects coming in, like, the EF will not be bootstrapping or supporting any more client teams, nor will like Joe at Consensus or any of these other people as well. So now we're like living in this new middleware renaissance layer where private capital is being put together by founders and being put together by users and partner projects. And our goal is to make that base layer that the EF built over the past 6 years stronger by having it be additive.
I'm running Get the Lighthouse. Is that default? Everyone's running that?
Yeah, so that repo right now is set up for Get the Lighthouse. We haven't gotten too fancy, but that's one of our pushes is, eventually we want to put this into all of the community launchers. Like it's not necessarily going to be like, this is how you're going to run it. So hope is that it can be in, Datnode, Steerium, Steakhouse. I'm afraid to like not miss anyone's names, but there's quite a few so far. But yeah, no, the goal is just to, yeah, as you said, I kind of describe it as you could build Mev Get or you could build Mev Boost. And like Mev Get was, dangerously successful. Like 90% of miners are running a single client, and then the EF are like, oh, this is a problem. So then they were like, let's, re-architect this. Let's make it a sidecar. Let's make it that, all of the clients can extract Mev. It can like fail and not take down the whole network and all those good things. So that's kind of, one of the things that we've been super focused on with DVT, and it's probably taken a bit longer as a result, and going down this middleware route and being able to run it with all of the different clients. But I think it's important to do because, as Colin said, if you're trying to replace them, you become your own kind of centralized threat vector and stuff. So you have to kind of go the long way sometimes.
That would be important for me to increase my willingness to promote it widely. Is that you do have that? I mean, I love the Get Lighthouse stack. Like I use it on my solo validators. It's a great stack, but I also, like, as Superfizz, we have to as a community, we have to push that client diversity. That's
why I'm a Nethermind Lighthouse guy.
Is our key already imported, or is that a manual step?
If the Docker mounts work properly, it should be fine. I think I'm having a bit of an issue though, but I haven't figured it out. If like, are any of your pods falling over unhealthy? Because one of mine might be.
I also see Nix, you had your hand raised for a while.
Yeah, I got a two-part question for you guys.
Cool.
Do you see what do you see as the difference between your guys' protocol and other DVT protocols? And also, do you see in the long term several DVT protocols coexisting, or would it be more efficient for one?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I'll start with the second question first from my perspective. I think if this layer is built correctly, it's winner take all because it's so difficult and so complex. And honestly, there's like very few humans who can actually build it because it like sits at the applied cryptography layer of the stack. So for those reasons, I do believe if it's built correctly, it should be winner take all. If there's multiple of these, then it actually becomes less helpful, right? Because through the middleware, you get to select multiple clients. So if you're addressing client diversity, there should be a small collection of middlewares that are used together inside of that. Just quickly on like Obol versus others, Obol has a super different community than any of the other projects building DVT, just based on our supporters. We actually recently just also closed our next round of fundraising, which will be announced in the coming weeks, which is super exciting. So we'll now kind of show our next group of supporters and like where it takes us in certain directions. I also think the secondary difference here is how we're delivering the technology. To the middleware component of it being more additive and supportive, and to the next piece, which to your comments earlier, Fizz, like DVT network can be thought of as a bad thing, right? A DVT network can be thought of as like a bunch of people who are all reliant upon each other, who are using the same technology. And since we've delivered it in a middleware, right, like the word network is actually up for redefinition in this concept, right? If you're taking DVT and you're building like, a competitive arena where everyone who is using that technology is connected to each other, it can become harmful, right? Like Obol and Charon is something that everyone can use a la carte, right? Each independent actor in the network, whether it's a pool or an individual or a group or an exchange, they all go off and use the technology for their own use case, right? And they're not upgrade independent of each other. Sorry, they're not upgrade dependent of each other. It's independent upgrades, right? So with our like way that we're launching it, it's very different than the way that other people are approaching it. And thirdly and lastly, from an economic perspective, we're very different. Obol today is a tokenless protocol. There's no token. There's no on-chain governance or anything that's a part of that. There's no pay for DVT and Obol token, we're deploying what's more of an optimism-like economic strategy, which is being a native fee sweep in ETH inside of that stack, and then regenerating that value across different projects in the space. So we're also, lastly, more economically similar to retroactive public goods funding than this like proprietary use our token and take our token and do different things with it. So I think those are the three biggest differences in us and others. There's also some new DVT stuff that's come out recently. Some liquid staking pools are trying to build their own implementation of DVT. So now there's like taking the whole stack and trying to build it. And that's like another difference, right? They see DVT, they know its properties, they want to use it inside of their pool, but instead of just building the pool and then using DVT, they're building the pool and DVT, which is another big difference between us, where we're only here to build the bottom half of that product because it's difficult enough that a whole team needs to focus on it.
Sorry, we're just in back channel trying to figure out some of this big picture stuff.
Yeah. Colin named them. They're not. Yeah.
Oh, I'm a fan of. And maybe it's not appropriate to bring it up in this call. Sorry. Okay, so I want to go back to our running validator. So we ran Docker Compose. When we Control C, we're going to close this window. If we run it as a daemon, it's going to run in the background. Any one of us can deposit 32 Gurley ETH as long as 4 to 5 of us are online. And I assume the Grafana dashboard is packaged in. So
exactly.
Essentially, I'll be keeping my eye on you guys, or you'll be keeping.
Yeah, if you want to
me.
localhost 3000, you should be able to see it.
I'm actually not on that. It's a remote machine, so.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But actually, I'm going to slide over to it because I want to see. Remote being across the room.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, one question that I had is if people from the EthStaker community or others want to get involved and play around with the testnet and do what we did here in the demo today, like what's the best site to go to, or do you guys have a Discord, or how does that work?
Yeah, I might let Chris take this one. Do you want to? Or I can do the others.
So I'm glad you asked. So we have just announced the release of this for Grelly testnet. I just posted the link in the chat, but you can go to grelly.launchpad.obol.tech. And we're kicking off a new testnet called BIA in the start of Q1. So we also have a type form for that to get signed up and get added to all of the clusters, which I also just put in the chat. And you could find the quick start guide there. We ran through the second half of this process, and I created the cluster, but it's pretty quick to create. We have a whole walkthrough on that, which I'll also drop in the chat here. And so it's a whole walkthrough how to create the cluster. As you guys saw, it just takes like 5 minutes or so. And yeah, you can set those withdrawal addresses instead of Superfizz. You can also set it to NoSafe or Splitter contract or really anything, any address that works to help divvy up the rewards.
Is the M of N, do you set that in the setup? Can it be any?
Good question. So there's two. Well, you could set it to different things, but the important part really is the consensus algorithm you have built in. So right now we have QBFT, which its safety like tolerance threshold is 3F+1. So the lowest you could do is like 3 of 4. If you went any like lower than that, the risk would be two people think we're going to sign this and 2 people think we're going to sign that, and they both sign both of them. So you need it to be 3 out of 4 or 5 out of 7. So there's only one thing that gets signed, assuming you've honest nodes. There's not 2 groups of 5 signing different things.
Would a 2 out of 3 work?
It will, not yet, but QBFT doesn't do 2 out of 3, but that is one of our plans.
I was just wondering what the smallest group size might be. But I mean, and theoretically, like one person could host, which totally defeats the purpose. But you know.
It's fine
Oh
if
yes,
you-
of
if you-
course.
if you few
Different places.
different houses.
Different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Not at the same
There-
place. Yeah.
Well,
No,
there's some good benefit though to that, you know, and like for example, our tech lead lives in Cape Town. They have daily power outages. So like running a node at home is impossible actually. So like what he's able to do is like set up a configuration with like a couple pieces in the cloud, one on-prem at a house with a generator, and like one on-prem at his house that like is susceptible to power failures, right? So like he can still use this unique combination of like on-prem and in the cloud from a centralized perspective. So it has like, you know, benefits for him because otherwise he couldn't even run a validator at home, you know, profitably.
Well, that makes really good sense for someone with, you know, 1,000 validators. Like, if you control multiple locations, that makes you more attack resistant to use that, you know, a 3 of 5. And I mean,
for sure.
if you're that big, you already have the ability to set up the infrastructure. So
And there's a lot of good people in the EthStaker community figuring out how to run on like $400 machines as well, though. So hopefully it'll be 4 different Raspberry Pis, and you just talk to your friend. You're like, "Can I plug that in your house?" And then just like plug it in when at a party and walk away, and never tell them that you know you're running a piece of the validator there.
yeah, it's really a range though for the people asking, you know, about a 400 validator. I get DMs very frequently who are like, you know, I have 8,000 ETH. How do I stake them? And I'm like, hold on, let me catch my breath. So this is potentially a solution that I would look forward to suggesting in the future.
Hey, can I ask a question? Can I ask a question about the winner takes all scenario? In that case, if every validator is running on Obol's DVT technology or DVT, what happens if there's a bug in an update?
Good question.
Yeah. Actually, Oshin, I'll let you handle this because you're most excited about it.
Yeah. So so the first thing is generally speaking, it helps to have multiple like implementations of the same spec or protocol. So you know the eventual answer is that you know the whole goal when we get Obol up and running is that it would be able to like return the rewards it makes into funding client teams that you know develop it out, and we have you know multiple independent implementations of the same spec. But broadly, even if there is just one client, it kind of relates to like the Mev Boost analogy again, is that we've not gone down the route of putting it into like you know one big pool or well one I guess even if I come back to like the networking side, in you know when you're pushing an update to like Geth or something, you have to basically pick a fork block and say you know at this block we're now speaking the new protocol, and we really need to pray that we've you know never pushed a dodgy update. Obol and these clusters are implemented a bit differently. So they're not just, you know, one big homogeneous mesh network that all, you know, starts to talk a new protocol at a different block. Each of these clusters are standalone from one another. So, you know, the 4 that we run now could be very like different from, you know, one that some other groups of people are running and so on. And this is kind of important, particularly for the like stability of releases and stuff, is that because all of the clusters are independent, you can update just one of them to the new version and see how it gets on. And then you're like, okay, now I can update 10% of my validators to the new version. Now I can update all of them. This wouldn't be possible if you were implemented as kind of like a mesh network or as part of a gossip network. But if you do have it like, no, these are all standalone little things. The real goal is that they fail independently. The last thing we want to do is get everyone running DVT slash at the same time, or to get everyone running DVT offline at the same time. So having this like, you know, independent clusters that don't share any networking model is one of the main reasons where it's like, yeah, you know, dodgy releases happen. Like, you know, it's just kind of a necessary, you know, evil or something. There's no such thing as, you know, never pushing a bad update. But the real goal is to have the fallout be fairly minor. And it's, oh, the first test cluster we upgraded fell over. Let's not continue to roll this out.
That's it causes me to wonder, and I never want to be antagonistic because I love you guys. But it causes me to wonder about as the EthStaker community, what is our comfort level with Obol being the DVT provider? Because, you know, as Colin said, it's a winner take all approach. And I struggle with those winner take alls in anything related to the beacon chain, because I have this firm belief that the more players we have, the more resilience we have overall. Right now I'm aware of, you know, the three products, and I'm sure that there are other products under development. I think it's something that we'll just want to think through as we move forward. Like, is it winner take all, or does it follow the same scheme that everything else follows, that diversity is better? So.
Yeah, I mean, I
For
think it's
sure.
up to the users, right? What does the community and what do users want? I do think though that the layer that it sits at, diversity comes from underneath it, and diversity comes from its design, right? So like moving forward, I don't think a sufficient answer to decentralization is a bunch of the same stuff. I actually don't think that that's like a great answer for decentralization beyond the core client stack of the ETH1s and the ETH2s, right? The fact of the matter is, like, the layer that we're building out, similar to the layer that the Flashbots team has built out, no one actually knows what the best way to like go about this is, right? And like what are actually the centralization vectors as it takes on its next adoption path. So, I'm willing to say that I don't also know if it's going to be winner take all, but I'm a big proponent of like, just be like throwing multiple of the same thing at a problem is not decentralization. Finding the right way to design something so that it adds more resiliency is a form of decentralization, and that's the layer that we're responsible for. So to be determined as to what it turns into. It can go anywhere.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm often accused of having naive attitudes toward decentralization, and I'm not mad about that. Like it's working okay so far. And those naive attitudes being more difference is better. One of the things I've really learned is that, especially, no offense to execution layer clients, more weak execution clients don't make us stronger. Having a few good execution clients makes us stronger. So I can sort of see that same sort of idea applying. Like I'm not looking for people to run a bunch of weak DVT solutions. What I would be most interested in are a few, a 2 or 3 really strong solutions that support everyone. So yeah. Anyway, the big picture is I've been a fan of Obol. I'm growing in my fanliness. I'm resenting myself for not being more active about getting involved in the investment round. But it's a great product. So so glad to meet with you guys today. My favorite thing is that we have the setup on video. So anyone who wants to go through this setup can now do it. It was something that would have taken me 5 hours to do on my own, and we have it now summarized in a great video. So that is a big value.
For sure. And in January, we'll be launching our next testnet, and it'd be great if we could get 5 or 10 EthStaker clusters running, so we can make a bit of a push then and group people up into teams and submit a few of them, and you can show off how much better you are than all the other kind of communities that running nodes.
It's actually going to be an EthStaker requirement in 2023 that you run an Obol DVT
Nice.
node. Not really. I make stuff up. I have no. Sorry. So yeah, thanks everyone. Are we gonna go ahead next? I'll bail
Is
out.
there anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
Nothing too major, I think. Thank you guys for having us on. Big fan of your work as always. I'm a lurker in the Discord and probably will continue to be. We shield the testnet in January. There'll be a lot of news in the new year. We'll be kind of announcing our roadmap to rolling this out more broadly. And yeah, just want to hang around and stay involved over the coming few months. It'll be a fun ride. It's not going to be a quick one, to be honest. We'll be seeing more of us.
Sweet. I think that Umbetica can now do the POAP to wrap up.
Sweet. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks Obol for showing
Apologies.
up. good times. Don't forget to claim your POAP. It's a big deal. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye. Hey, let's do this again. When's a good next time to catch up?
Probably the next test net we kick off or something.
Okay. I want to stay in. I like it. I don't get really obsessed about a lot of products, but I really like the idea behind this. So all right. Bye-bye, y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Good.